listeners. Welcome to EMS at Sea Level. Once again, I am joined by Carl Hung of Season Group. Carl, absolute pleasure to talk. I was looking back through previous interviews, and I think it was back end of 22 or 23 that we spoke, and you'd recently acquired PyCom. Just give me an update on what's been happening there and, just kind of a brief overview of activity since we last spoke.
Great. Yeah. Well, so thank you for having me back here. I appreciate that. I can't believe it's already been a year and a half already since we last spoke.
Yeah.
It's time flies, right? Especially in the EMS world, for sure.
Mm.
So I think the last time we spoke, I just bought PyCom.
Yeah.
And it's been an interesting ride for sure, right? This was a strategic acquisition that we made where we felt that it would bring extreme value to our customers, our EMS customers in particular, because PyCom itself, they're an IoT modules company, right? Very, very successful modules manufacturer that's sold to a lot of hobbyists, multi-connectivity modules. So whether you want it in Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, cellular, or LoRa or Sigfox, they can have it all on one board, right? So from a hobbyist standpoint, they can play around with it and build a business out of these devices. And they're all trying to do that. So they're very successful in the hobbyist world. But what they were not good at was the scaling to commercial, to a bigger companies. How do you target a small and medium enterprise or a Fortune 1000 company? The same business model works. So from the last time we spoke till now, we've been focusing on a solution for these commercial companies. Where we most recently launched our latest product. We call this inside the box is the product. We call it the F1. It's a multi-connected module, and we are selling this to enterprises where the engineers, for them, they want to have an idea, but they want to build a proof of concept. They don't know how to start. Many buy a Raspberry Pi or whatnot, but if it's a low-power device, our F1 evaluation kit does the job, whereby it's got a processor inside as well too. You can build an IoT device out of our evaluation board. Within one day, it can be up and running.
Wow.
Right. It's a zero-touch provisioning proposition, and the whole mentality is there's so much there's a lot of shortage of engineering talent right now.
Yeah.
Right. They want to make it as easy as possible to launch products, and so this product here does that. You can launch a POC in a day. Right. And then you can prove to your bosses that, oh, I've got a great idea. Can I get budget to
go
the
to
product
the next
itself?
stage? Yeah.
Right. And that's where our value goes in. Right. They will come to us hopefully where we will design the end product for them and we'll build the end product for them.
Yeah.
So for
And
us, we feel
that's really interesting, Carl. It's that idea that you've always had with the kind of SG Wireless model where you have that kind of full stack approach, where as well as manufacturing, you're supporting on either end. And this is just a great example of one of those building blocks that you have intellectual property and skin in the game that can help your customers. And I think it's this really interesting development we've seen in the industry where you're exploring kind of the role of EMS and kind of slightly disrupting that and saying, hey, where else can we get involved? Where can we add more value? And if we can add more value, maybe we can extract a bit more margin.
Yeah, well, especially with the whole nearshoring exercise that we're seeing right now, right? It's not about labor costs anymore. Labor costs it's only going to go up, right? It's all about the engineering resources, where we can add most value to the customers. Especially we talked about this pre-call as well too. The new tariffs in place, right? The new introduced IC tariffs, right? Going from 25% to 50%.
Yeah.
People are nervous. Naturally, they should be nervous. But when I heard this news, I saw an opportunity there where what this means is everyone is going to try to design out the Chinese ICs. So if that was the case, engineering again is going to be the shortage. There's going to be shortage of engineering talent. And that's where I think we can bring the value to the customers. It's not moving production from China to Mexico. It's as simple as that. It's, well, how do we redesign your complete product so that it's no longer reliant on a Chinese supply chain?
Yeah. It's actually building out that supply chain resilience, which we've seen underlined from trade wars through pandemics, through component shortages. And now, again, we seem to be in a phase of trade wars. We mentioned, again, pre-call, We talked a little bit about those tariffs, and the 100% on EVs is a bit of a shocker. When you look at taxing a product from one country at such a high rate, it shows you the level of kind of almost anti-globalization feeling you're seeing from certain countries and certain regions, and that pushes us much more towards this regionalization model. So I think there are two things there. One is, how do you as a business owner manage your footprint in terms of that regionalization trend? And the other thing, as you say, how do you shift your talent mix and maybe increase the number of engineering staff you've got? I mean, the acquisition of PyCom is one of those elements, but you've got to build global engineering teams to support that as well, I guess.
And that is the key to our growth plan, really. First off, it's still going to be China plus one, right?
Mm,
We feel that there's so much intellectual property, so much talent in China, and the amount of engineers graduating out of a country with 1.3 billion people is enormous. Everyone's
yeah,
studying to be engineer here. So we've got a very big pool of engineering talent to choose from. The cost of engineering talent has remained very competitive with the rest of the world. So from that standpoint wise, it will still be a very Chinese um, focused engineering capabilities. But it's how do we become more localized in terms of supply chain, right? Our
yeah,
sources, we need to be very, very diligent on where the actual products are manufactured in the first place, and that's key. There's going to be continued expansion into Malaysia and Mexico, without a doubt, right? Even with Mexico cost of labor increasing 25% in them,
mm,
it still has a significant advantage whereby it's right next to the US, right?
yeah,
For us,
with a trade
we're in
agreement.
Reynosa with the trade agreement, right? It helps a lot. You bring it across the border to build in Mexico, all of a sudden all the tariffs are gone.
Mm,
So that's very advantageous, and it's a good area to be in because in Reynosa, our team members flying around from around the world, they're actually staying over the McAllen side. So every night they go back to McAllen, US. It's easier for them to adjust to that lifestyle as opposed to
mm,
throwing them down and living in a Guadalajara
yeah,
area. We feel as a company much more safer knowing our colleagues are staying over in the US side. Same with
yeah,
our customers as well too. So
yeah,
expansion for sure in Malaysia and Mexico to continue this, but we do need to develop that supply chain. That supply chain needs to work, and unfortunately, it's not there yet.
yeah,
So from our standpoint, it will be more vertical integration to plastics. Definitely needs to be done locally in Malaysia and
yeah,
Mexico to
yeah.
support our box build initiatives.
Yeah,
So
you've got to build that footprint out yourself. It's a long time waiting for the supply chain to catch up. What about new geographies? Have you looked at India, or have you looked at anywhere else as a potential? When people talk about the exodus from China, and I think we should come back to that because I don't think it's as big an exodus as people think, as you rightly say. But people refer to Vietnam, Mexico, and India as being the big winners. Obviously, we're seeing some trend towards India, and they seem to be in a mode to do business globally.
yeah.
Have you looked there? Is that something you've considered?
No, further footprints not on our radar right now because it's we're more focusing on a design footprint, right? Where are
Yeah.
we adding more engineers? I think that is key because in a EMS world, right, you look at the price of a box build, labor accounts for maybe 5 to 8% of the
Mm,
costs, right? So whether it's in Malaysia or Mexico or India or Vietnam, you save 20%, it's only 1% off the final build,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The overall impact is on the bill of material.
Yeah.
How do you drive the bill of material as low as possible? That has a much more big effect itself because in Vietnam, we just saw news this morning on CNN. The government's telling people to cut back on production because
Mm,
or roll back production because there's shortage of power. Right.
okay.
So Vietnam's going through the same issues that China did back in the early 2000s
Yeah.
of not having the proper infrastructure in place to support.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
could see the same thing over in India as well too, in the bureaucracy possible there. It's not worth that risk. If we can shave 1% or 2% off the bill of material for our customers, we can justify being in a higher low-cost country like Malaysia and Mexico.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So right now it's about looking for that engineering talent that is cost effective for
Yeah.
sure. And it depends on what we want to do, right? I think from a cloud standpoint, DevOps standpoint, because we're offering that service now where we have our own cloud called Control. CTRL is our cloud
Hmm.
platform that connects to our F1. And the developers themselves, it's around the world right now. We have developers in Toronto, we have developers in Eindhoven, Netherlands, China, and we're adding a few developers in Egypt and looking into
Hey.
Vietnam too, right?
Yeah.
Because I think with COVID, it's shown us that, yeah, development, software development for sure, cloud development can be done globally as long as you have a
Yeah.
very robust system to managing as a team. So
Yeah.
we're moving
Yeah.
more towards that to be more cost effective and quick.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting. It plays to what I was speaking about, that vertical integration that you've done very successfully as you kind of changed the shape and complexion of the business. As you
Yeah.
remain a manufacturing powerhouse, but you have all these other elements that, one, draw customers in, but secondly add additional value to those. Just going back to the China plus one thing, I think what we sometimes underestimate is the importance of the domestic market for China, and also what we're seeing in terms of a trend of them changing what they manufacture. So just as they
Yeah.
might not be the go-to for EMS, or as the factory of the world for EMS at the moment, they seem to have become the factory of the world for EVs. Massive number of car producers. I think BYD are now larger in terms of size than Tesla, so now the largest EV company as well. Building very competitive, very high quality vehicles. So there's kind of a changing complexion there, but there's also a growth in internal demand. That again is something that really encourages you to keep a solid footprint in China, I guess.
Yeah, the market over here has changed drastically during COVID,
Mm.
where I think the government has subsidized certain industries development, and it's paying off a lot for sure. I think the first step that the government focused in on was automation, where put a lot of money into robotics. And that's really helped spur our manufacturing efficiency as well. And that's what we want to export to the rest of the world, right? Build more automation in Mexico, Malaysia, that de-risk ourselves from the minimum wage increases that we're seeing.
Yeah,
So the automation has helped China become much more competitive itself, because our labor cost has risen because our cost of living has risen. People have expected to live a much more prosperous life, where before people were saying, oh, it's very nice to have a cell phone, right? If you have a cell phone, you're well off.
yeah,
But it's no longer like that, right? Everyone is moving up chain now.
yeah, of course.
Electric scooters, everyone's got an electric scooter to start for sure, but then it's electric vehicles now, right? The amount of
Yeah.
cars that we see on the streets now, I can buy an electric vehicle in China for around $7,000 US. Right,
Wow.
$7,000 US, I get an electric vehicle that can take me a good 100 kilometers or 200 kilometers, good enough for a daily commute kind of car.
Yeah.
And that's been a big change for the market, where I think there's a lot of activity right now from a manufacturing supporting electric vehicles. And the next phase that we're seeing right now is that it's moving towards the autonomous driving.
Yeah.
And it's not just for taxi driving itself too. It's a lot for the deliveries, right?
Right.
Where during COVID, pre-COVID, one of the companies to thrive in this time frame was a company called Meituan, which is a food delivery company.
Mm.
Food delivery blossomed. You've got Alibaba, Taobao blossomed too.
Yeah.
I can order something and online on Taobao, and it could be here next day. I don't need to have a special account for it. I don't need to pay for shipping at all. It's here the next day because
Yeah.
China's got a great logistics system in place.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing now is they're taking that EV capability, taking the AI capability, and putting it together and creating autonomous deliveries,
Yeah.
where I can order KFC now. I don't have to see anyone. It's an autonomous vehicle coming over to me, and then I just input my QR code, and then the locker with my KFC is delivered to
Yeah.
my door,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that cuts out the delivery side of the people working delivery.
Yeah.
So but the Chinese people are very resilient. They're always thinking of very innovative ways to
Mm.
uh, make a buck, right? They're very
Yeah.
very very entrepreneurial spirit. So as technology changes, as people are moved out from one industry to the next, there will be a new industry that pops up for sure.
Yeah, 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 and we should absolutely embrace the fact that everybody's getting wealthier and everybody's having a better standard of living. And when you look at the last 20 years as, or the last 30 plus years as China became the factory of the world, the number of people that took out of poverty was hugely valuable. And now we're seeing those people that are taken out of poverty arrive in the middle class and become consumers, and that means that China becomes a very significant consumer market, as is happening in Southeast Asia and other parts of the world. So it does change this whole global dynamic as
Yep.
in, I think it feels now, and again, I don't know if this is post and pre-COVID thinking. It feels now that chasing low-cost labor is the old way of thinking about manufacturing footprints. And now it's how do I get the right how do I support the right local market? How do I support the right regional market? How do I make sure I've got the right talent, the right supply chain, the right infrastructure around me? It's not just how can I hire someone for a few dollars less every day. Um, and I think that was the thinking that really grew the EMS industry a decade ago. But I think certainly post-COVID, that feels very different now. It feels like the EMS industry is much more mature, much more thoughtful about where it builds out capacity. Do you feel
Yeah.
that's the case? I know you feel that's the case with Season Group, but do you feel that's the case as you look at the broader industry as well?
Well, what you just said, right? I said brings me back to economics 101, where Adam Smith talks about the invisible hand itself too, and then also how Henry Ford, for him, he felt that he wants to pay a good salary because those people building the cars are the ones buying the cars,
Buying the cars, yeah.
right? So in a sense, we're actually seeing that happen, right?
Mm,
It's definitely happening where all around Southeast Asia, people are now living a pretty decent path right now, where if you compare it to a lot of the more developed countries too, where our workers or any workers in Southeast Asia themselves, really, we're provided with food, we're provided with lodging. Every dollar that we make is take home pay, right? Taxes
mm,
deducted from the salary, so everything
yeah,
we pay is they pocket it. So in
yeah.
essence, for them, it's debt free situation,
It's a
right? It's
disposable
debt free
income
situation,
situation.
all disposable income, and where are they going to turn to for that, right? The new generation, first off, social media is what's driving them. So any company trying to expand anywhere, the first focus is social media, right? If you want to sell something, make sure it's online first.
Mm,
And with that, people are buying a whole load of new devices out there, devices that you don't
yeah,
even know you needed, right?
yeah,
Over in China, you go on Taobao again, there's so many things that, oh, wow, there's a device for this, there's a device for that. And it makes life itself a lot easier. And it's
yeah,
not an expensive endeavor for sure. So I think the choices are much more prevalent. And as a
yeah,
company, as all companies do, we just need to have a much more entrepreneurial uh, look at things, right? But the only issue from all EMS is the risk factor, right? What do you bank on? What do you not bank on?
yeah,
Because you can't entertain all customers. You have to filter the right
yeah,
opportunities for the right markets as well too. And that, in essence, it goes back to we're no longer EMSs are no longer just low labor costs, right?
no,
EMSs, we are a business solutions provider, right? We're
yeah,
analyzing a situation and trying to solve your problems. I I,
yeah.
I don't think gone are the days where yeah, it's just come to any EMS, it's all just the labor that's
It's
provided.
all the
You
same. It's
choose an
just
EMS.
labor arbitrage. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah,
You choose the EMS because the solutions they provide. Are they talking to you about the right
yeah.
aspect of
Yeah, the
things?
right issues, the right challenges. And I think I think that's key. And when I look at the companies, the OEM companies and the brands that are most successful, it's those that have realized that and have really partnered strategically with the right EMS company because they realize by doing that, they can just focus on marketing their product, developing new product ideas, developing markets. And focus on what is perhaps their unique part of intellectual property in that product and leave everything that's related to supply chain, fulfillment, and manufacturing to a partner. And if you do that, I think that's the most successful relationship for the EMS. But I think more importantly, it's the most successful relationship for the brand. So yeah, it does feel, and I didn't really come into this discussion with that in my mind, but it does feel that like there's a bit of a maturity arriving in the market, much as we still have this continuous disruption that we've had in the past. If it wasn't the last trade war, it was COVID, and then it was the supply chain crisis, and now we seem to be stepping up trade wars yet again. Um, you've always got a bank on change occurring and disruption occurring.
If anything we learned, it's that you can never stay put, right? There will always be
Yeah,
change, and it's what makes life interesting, right?
yeah,
If you're dealing with the same problems every day, then
yeah,
it's a boring job for
yeah,
us in our
absolutely.
position. We're always talking about different things,
Yeah,
and it helps, right? You have
yeah,
to look into the future as well too. Where right now we haven't even talked about this, where with automation and AI itself,
yeah,
right? Both of those will have drastic changes on how EMS works, right?
yeah,
Automation and AI will become the normalizer, right? It doesn't matter where you
yeah,
manufacture in the future. You can manufacture in Switzerland or
yeah,
manufacture in New York City, and it
yeah.
should be the same cost, right? It's
Yeah,
the ideas that matter in
yeah,
the future.
yeah, and I think that focus on automation this year, and as the market has perhaps been a little bit softer for some people, there's definitely been a focus on automation, and that's not just for competitiveness, but I think it's super important for competitiveness, and we can do a lot with that. But it's also because as we see this reshoring or regionalization trend, we're seeing issues in certain pockets of talent, and I think.
Yep.
Getting sufficient talent is a challenge, particularly in, say, the US. It's not so hard in Mexico. It's not so hard in Southeast Asia. It's maybe easier in China. I think, again, with India, the expectation is lots of graduates, but lots of training required. Um, but if we can mitigate that talent shortage with automation, that's a good solution. And, AI
Mhm.
plays a big part in that, I think.
Indeed, and like I think the mentality for people growing up in Canada, for example, my nephew, we put him on the production line a month ago,
Mm.
just to let him know, okay,
Yeah, how this all
how we make a
works.
living, right? And for him, he's like, wow, this is really boring work, right? It's 8 hours standing up doing assembly work, and he's like, it's
Yeah.
really boring. So all those countries, all those people will have the issues thinking, okay, who's going to be manning those production lines? It's a good use of their time to all be working on a production line. Where no, it should not be. It should be fully automated.
Yeah,
And definitely, I think the investment in that area, that's where the biggest market is, right? Automation
yeah,
is key.
yeah,
AI itself, a lot of my work now, I'm ChatGPT friendly, right? Everything I generate,
yeah,
it's ChatGPT generated. And
yeah,
who uses it best, again, has the most competitive advantage.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's really interesting as well. I think the way you apply AI is fascinating as a market shifter because it affects the way the way we operate, the way we run our business, but it also affects our business in terms of what we're producing. The demand
Yeah,
for rack-based computing and all that kind of thing is huge as a result of AI. AI is also going to deliver more product potential to the marketplace. So there's a whole bunch of dynamics there. But when I look at what you're doing in terms of shifting perhaps your team mix to higher paid, more sustainable jobs that are more engineering based. I think that's a very solid trend, and supporting that with um, a global footprint that fits your customer base, and then backing that up with the operational excellence and automation you're talking about, stand you in good stead for the future. Any further plans in terms of acquisitions or any shifts that we should be aware of, or is it all stuff you need to keep under your hat for the moment?
Well, it's all focuses on this. All right, that this is
Yeah,
the key for us for the next few years. Right, we want to
yeah,
go out there and talk about this all the time. Where,
yeah,
so for us, this is the company's focus. Like we
yeah,
believe fully, if a customer buys one of these, then they'll be able to launch a product very quickly. Right, we
yeah.
put a lot of product time and pride into this. Essentially, if you look at this packaging, we put a lot of time thinking about the packaging itself too. Right,
Yeah,
with the whole proof of concept side, with the you buy Raspberry Pi, you build a Raspberry Pi, you have to buy enclosure and then you put it together, right? And you put it on
yeah.
the field. For us, we sat down and like, why even bother with the plastic enclosure, right? This
Just
happens
put it
to be the
back in the
enclosure,
box. Yeah,
right? We've got cut holes here for the antenna, for the power 5E cable as well too, for the
yeah,
LED light here. This is the enclosure, right? It's
yeah,
POC. You don't need a
yeah.
plastic enclosure.
No, no,
You
you
want it to
don't.
be IP65, put a plastic bag around it, put it
Yeah,
outside, right?
absolutely.
Same
Put
purpose.
it in a Ziploc. Yep.
Right. Yeah. So our whole focus is on creating a great experience for our customers, a premium
Yeah,
experience for our customers that will delight them, where they open it up and they're like, oh, wow, it's set up already.
yeah,
Right. So,
yeah. I'm ready to
we
go.
want,
Yeah,
yeah, we want them to have that wow factor all the way from the concept stage all the way to the delivery stage.
yeah,
Right. So
absolutely.
the company is very focused internally right now to give this service to all of our existing customers.
Yeah, yeah. Well, every success with that, continued success with the business. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat to me. It is always a pleasure. And we'll talk again soon. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you, Phil.